So, uh, what if the reality you inhabit every day isn't quite real?
Hmm.
What if you're looking, I don't know, distorted reflections and you think they're the actual thing?
Well, it sounds like something out of science fiction, doesn't it?
It
But
does.
it's also the core of a philosophical idea that's, what, over 2,000 years old?
Exactly. We're diving deep today into Plato's ancient allegory of the cave. And yeah, on the surface, it's this simple story about prisoners, shadows.
Right.
But when you look closer, especially using the sources we've gathered, psychology articles, stuff on social media, AI, even a really interesting Reddit thread,
Mm-hmm.
you suddenly see how this ancient allegory really lights up the challenges we face now with perception, information, figuring out what's even real anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission really is to unpack these different takes and see how Plato's cave helps us understand the many caves we might find ourselves stuck in today and pull out the useful bits.
Okay, let's start with the original story. Because, it's the foundation for everything else. Plato lays it out in the Republic.
Right. So imagine this. You've got people who've been prisoners their entire lives, chained up deep inside a cave.
And they're chained so they can only look one way.
Exactly. Straight ahead at a blank wall. That's all they can see.
Okay? And behind them, there's a fire.
Uh-huh. A fire. And between the fire and the prisoners' backs, there's like a low wall, and people walk along it carrying objects, puppets, statues, stuff like that.
So the fire casts the shadows of those objects onto the wall the prisoners are facing.
Precisely. That's the only visual input they've ever had of, well, anything beyond their chains, just these flickering shadows.
So naturally, to them, those shadows are real. That's reality.
Totally. And if they hear echoes bouncing around the cave,
They think the sounds are coming from the shadows.
yeah, they've got absolutely no concept of the actual objects, the people carrying them, the fire behind them, let alone the world outside the cave. Nothing.
And the story goes, one prisoner eventually gets out, right? Sees the real world, the sun.
Yeah, the escapee sees the true forms of things, and then, crucially, goes back down, tries to tell the others.
And how does that go down? Not well, I imagine.
Not well at all. The sources mention, the other prisoners don't just disbelieve him. They think he's crazy. His eyes aren't adjusted to the dark anymore.
So he can't see the shadows as clearly as they can.
Right, so they think the journey outside ruined him, and they might even try to harm him if he tries to free them, disrupting their whole reality.
Wow. Okay, so that's the ancient picture. Stark.
But what's really fascinating is how perfectly it maps onto our own, individual experience. One of the sources, a psychologist writing in Psychology Today, uses it to talk about how we get trapped.
Trapped by our own minds, like a psychological cave.
Yeah, exactly. Think about when you get stuck in a certain perspective on a problem, or you hold these really rigid beliefs about yourself, maybe. That fixed view limits what you see. You end up mistaking your perception of things for how things actually are, just like the prisoners mistaking shadows for real objects.
Okay, I see that. And the psychologist actually suggests ways to, break out of that.
Yes, practical techniques used in therapy. One is literally called stepping outside the cave.
Okay, how does that work?
You imagine you're giving advice to a close friend who's dealing with the exact same situation you are.
Okay. So creating distance.
Right. That distance lets you see it more objectively. You might realize, wow, I'm being way too hard on myself, or my thinking here is really narrow. You probably wouldn't judge your friend that harshly.
That makes sense. It's a simple shift, but probably really effective. What else?
There's reversing roles, kind of the flip side.
Okay.
You imagine what that same trusted friend would say to you about your problem. You're trying to borrow their perspective, their likely kindness or insight to see your situation in a new light. Maybe challenge your own assumptions.
Right. Tapping into that external viewpoint. And the third one.
Time projection. This one's interesting.
How does that work?
You picture yourself, say, decades in the future, looking back on whatever's troubling you right now.
Gaining perspective through time.
Exactly. That hindsight, the wisdom you'd hopefully have gained, can make a current problem seem much smaller or less overwhelming. It changes how you interpret it. These aren't just ideas. They're active ways to challenge those mental shadows.
It really shows the depth of the allegory, doesn't it? Down to how our own thoughts work. Okay, but let's zoom out a bit, because your sources make a really strong case that society today has built this massive new cave.
Oh, definitely. The social media cave.
Yeah. An article from the Texas Public Policy Foundation specifically calls our screens the Black Mirror, the new cave wall.
It's such a powerful image, isn't it?
It really is. Instead of shadows on rock, We're seeing these curated, often pretty distorted digital images of the world, of other people's lives.
Yeah, and think about how ingrained it is. How many people first thing in the morning reach for their phone? Right. One source even mentioned those sleep cycle apps. They tell you how well you supposedly slept before you even check in with your own body. So right away, data is shaping your self-perception.
Before direct experience, what?
And then you start scrolling, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, and what do you see? The highlight reels, right?
Yeah, the perfect vacations, the amazing meals, the career successes.
Exactly. Digital shadows that can easily make you feel like your own life with all its normal ups and downs is somehow lacking because you're comparing your reality to their performance.
And it's not just the images, right? Even simple digital communication.
Oh yeah, email, texting. It lacks tone, body language, all those nonverbal cues. You're just getting the words, the text shadows. So much potential for misinterpretation.
Definitely experience that. And then there's the news and political stuff we see online. It often feels designed to provoke a strong reaction, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Tailored to grab your attention, make you angry or scared. It can create this really skewed sense of what's happening in the world because you're only seeing the most inflammatory shadows.
The Texas Public Policy Foundation piece talks about being shackled to devices, spending so much time in these digital spaces.
Yeah, potentially losing touch with, actual direct experience. The world right in front of you.
And there's another layer, too. An article in Philosophy now brought up how reality itself isn't always fixed. It can be, socially constructed.
Right, shaped by what we collectively believe. They use the example of people once believing in unicorns.
Okay.
So the social media cave isn't just reflecting reality poorly, it's actively shaping a shared reality, creating these collective shadows that influence what whole groups of people think is true or important.
Which makes it even more powerful and potentially more distorting. Your sources really dug into that negative side, like the piece on voiceover.blog talking about sensationalism.
Oh, yeah. How stuff that grabs headlines isn't necessarily the most important stuff.
Like celebrity gossip gets way more attention than, say, complex policy changes.
Exactly. Because the dramatic shadows get more clicks, more engagement. It distracts from things that might actually affect us more deeply.
And selective reporting, too. How the same event can be framed completely differently.
Totally. A protest, for example. One outlet shows peaceful marchers, another focuses only on a small skirmish. You get completely different shadows of the same event, designed to manipulate opinion.
Plus, the whole issue of who owns the media. Concentrated ownership.
Right. A few big companies controlling the flow of information. Their interests, corporate or political, can shape the narrative, consciously or unconsciously. They might prefer shadows that maintain the status quo.
One source, Miss Horn's Yarns, mentioned a commenter, Melanie John Dunn, who called social media a theater.
Yeah, with very believable actors. It's a performance.
And the algorithms are the directors, deciding what scene we see next.
That's a great way to put it. Because, as both that comment and the voiceover.blog piece point out, the algorithms are designed to create these narrow information feeds. Filter bubbles, echo chambers.
If you click on certain things, it just shows you more of the same.
Exactly. It reinforces what you already think or like. You end up getting, as one source put it, a very limited set of information, attitudes, and beliefs.
So you're basically being steered deeper into one corner of the cave.
Yeah, shown only the shadows that confirm your existing view, making it harder to encounter anything different, anything that might challenge you or broaden your perspective.
Okay, so it sounds pretty bleak. How do we navigate this? How do we get out? Or at least get a better view?
Well, the voiceover.blog source had some concrete suggestions focused on media literacy. The big one is seeking out diverse perspectives.
So not just sticking to your usual news sources or feeds.
Right, you have to make a conscious effort. Look at mainstream sources, alternative ones, independent journalists, maybe even sources from other countries. Try to see the object from multiple angles, not just one shadow.
Even sources you think you'll disagree with.
Especially, though, sometimes, just to understand their perspective. And the other absolutely critical piece is fact-checking. In this environment, with so much misinformation, disinformation, you just have to verify stuff. Use reputable fact-checking sites, cross-reference claims. Don't just take a meme or a headline as truth.
It sounds like effort, like consciously trying to turn your head in the cave.
It is effort. It's deciding not to be passive, not to just accept the shadows flickering in front of you. It's about taking responsibility for your own understanding.
Okay, so we've got the personal, psychological cave and this huge, complex social media cave. Let's shift again. Artificial intelligence. This felt like a really new and kind of mind-bending application of the allegory. That Reddit discussion was buzzing with it.
It really was. A user named Rhythm Robber hit on something core, I think. They pointed out that AI, especially these large language models, learn from data. Massive amounts of data.
Right. Text, images, code.
Exactly. But what is that data? It's essentially records of human experience, descriptions about the world. It's not direct experience of the world itself.
So AI learns from the shadows of human experience, not from living.
That's the idea. Rhythm Robber and others noted that AI, well, current AI anyway, lacks things we take for granted, like embodiment, having a physical body interacting with the world.
Or consciousness, a sense of self.
Yeah. Or qualia, that subjective first-person feeling of what it's like to see red, or feel joy, or taste salt. AI can process data about redness, but it doesn't experience red.
It can describe sadness based on analyzing millions of texts, but it doesn't feel sad.
Exactly. And another point raised was whether AI models can even truly reflect on their own understanding or ask fundamental questions about their existence the way humans do, even though they can mimic conversation incredibly well.
So its knowledge is fundamentally secondhand, derived.
Yes, built from analyzing human output. As Rhythm Robber said, it's knowledge that's been flattened, converted into text and code, losing the dimensionality of actual lived experience, like knowing everything about love from poems and studies, but never having felt it.
That leads right into this crucial distinction that came up again and again in the discussion: knowledge versus wisdom.
Right. Knowledge is having the information. AI is amazing at that. Wisdom is more about understanding context, applying knowledge appropriately, ethically, knowing the nuances. That often comes from experience.
Rhythm Robber used that great line. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit.
But wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
Yeah, perfect. The AI knows the botanical fact, knowledge, but it lacks the lived experience, the cultural context, the taste association wisdom that tells us tomatoes generally don't belong with sweet fruits.
Or that really worrying example of the medical AI that learned to associate rulers in X-ray images with tumors.
Because the rulers were only present in images of tumors used for measurement.
Exactly. It learned a pattern, a correlation, knowledge, but completely missed the underlying reality, understanding. It lacked the wisdom to know the ruler wasn't causing or indicating the tumor.
That connects to the Chinese room thought experiment, right? The idea that you could manipulate symbols perfectly according to rules without any real understanding of meaning.
Yeah, it raises the question, is AI truly understanding, or is it just becoming incredibly sophisticated at pattern matching and predicting the next word, mimicking understanding based on the shadows it learned from?
So the big concern articulated there is that we might have AI with vast encyclopedic knowledge,
Gleaned entirely from secondhand accounts, from the shadows.
but without the wisdom or understanding that comes from actual experience.
Which, as someone warned, could make it foolish to trust its wisdomless knowledge, especially if we turn to it for guidance on, the really human stuff, life, meaning, ethics.
That's a sobering thought. But to be fair, the Reddit thread wasn't all one-sided, was it? There were counterarguments.
Oh, definitely. It was a proper discussion. One really interesting idea, from Tiki Dio and acknowledged by Rhythm Robber too, was, well, maybe we humans are in deeper caves than we think.
How so?
Maybe AI, by crunching data from millions of our individual human caves, is actually seeing larger patterns, connections between the caves that we ourselves can't perceive from our limited viewpoint.
Like it has a meta view of the collective human shadows.
Sort of, yeah,
Yeah.
a different kind of perspective. And someone named Montrose argued that AI is learning from experience, just a different kind, through its interactions, feedback, reinforcement learning. It is adapting based on outcomes.
And others pointed out, quite rightly, that human knowledge isn't perfect either. It's also limited, filtered through our senses, our biases.
Right. We use models, maps, not the territory, as one user put it. And a lot of our knowledge is also indirect, learned from books, teachers, language. We don't directly experience everything we know.
So maybe AI learning from text isn't that different from us learning from text.
It's a fair point. And Shower Grapes added that maybe AI has an advantage. It can be told it's in a cave, that there's something outside. It has access to the philosophical concept, something humans took ages to figure out.
Okay, so it's complex. The AI cave isn't just a simple limitation. It makes us question what knowledge even is.
And reminds us, as auto-breathing off F stressed, that we're still talking about current AI. It's nowhere near true artificial general intelligence or replicating human consciousness. That's a whole other level of complexity.
It's still reflecting human shadows, however sophisticated.
For now, yes.
Okay. Psychological cave, social media cave, AI cave, lots of modern takes. But then there was this final source from Redliak, which threw a curveball regarding Plato's original intention.
Yeah, this was fascinating. It argued that the allegory of the cave isn't primarily about epistemology, how we know things in general. It's fundamentally political.
Political. How that challenges the way it's usually taught.
Totally. The argument is, look closely at the text. The prisoners aren't necessarily all of humanity. The cave isn't just the everyday physical world.
Okay.
This reading focuses on the strong political language Plato uses. Imprisonment, coercion, being forced out, manipulation, who set up the fire and puppets, the prisoners competing for honors and prizes based on shadow recognition.
Like status games within the cave.
Exactly. And the potential violence towards the returning escapee. The source emphasizes, this cave seems man-made, contrived by humans for human purposes. It's a system.
So the chains aren't just ignorance, they're societal structures. Political manipulation, bad education.
That's the idea. This interpretation links the allegory directly to Plato's critiques elsewhere in the Republic of, say, sophistic education that teaches rhetoric over truth, or the way popular theater and poetry can appeal to base emotions and mislead people.
Ah, so the poets and playwrights are like the guys carrying the puppets, casting appealing shadows.
Potentially, yeah. And the corrupting influence of the multitude, the pressures of popular opinion that can sway even potentially good souls away from philosophy.
So the prisoners might specifically be those philosophically inclined souls who get trapped by the culture, chasing political power or social approval, the shadows, instead of pursuing truth.
That's a key part of this reading. The bad education, the cultural pressures, those are the chains. Socrates then becomes this figure trying to break those specific political and cultural chains.
Okay, so in this view, the famous ascent out of the cave, it's not just about learning.
It's primarily about liberation, political and cultural liberation from that specific corrupting system of the cave city, escaping the bad influences and power dynamics.
And then once you're free from that political imprisonment,
Then you can begin the true philosophical journey towards understanding reality, the journey described in Plato's other analogies like the divided line. The political escape has to come first.
so you need to be freed from the cave to gain the wisdom needed to potentially go back and reform the cave.
Exactly. The political and the philosophical are linked, but the argument is that the primary drama of the cave allegory itself is the political liberation needed to even start the philosophical ascent.
Wow, that really reframes it. It makes Plato's story feel even more immediate, like a critique of power and culture that still resonates.
It really does. It forces us, again, to ask, what systems, what cultural shadow shows are shaping our perceptions and values today?
So pulling all this together, we've seen the allegory applied in so many ways. The psychological cave of our own biases and limited perspectives.
The social media cave, with its curated realities, filter bubbles, and performance culture.
The potential AI cave,
Yeah.
built on secondhand knowledge, raising questions about understanding versus information.
And this powerful political reading of Plato's original intent, a critique of corrupting cultural and political systems.
It's kind of amazing how this one ancient story keeps providing such a useful lens for examining our world.
Yeah.
It constantly pushes us to question what we accept as real or true.
And what constitutes real understanding versus just, recognizing shadows, whether they're on a cave wall or a phone screen.
And like some sources reminded us, maybe we should be humble. Human perception is always filtered, always a map, not the territory. We're all experiencing some version of shadows.
Yeah. The challenge isn't necessarily finding some ultimate, unfiltered reality, maybe. It's more about discerning which sources, which experiences are more trustworthy. How do we get closer to wisdom, to genuine understanding, rather than just accumulating shadow knowledge?
And being aware of the caves we inhabit, whether they're built by our own minds, by technology, or by society.
It really makes you think about where your attention goes, doesn't it? And whose shadows you're watching most closely.
Absolutely. So maybe that's the thought to leave everyone with today. Take a moment and consider, in which caves do you find yourself spending the most time? What might it look like to try and step outside those particular caves, even just a little, in our world today?
And maybe most importantly, how do you decide what's real, what's trustworthy, when there are so many shadows flickering all around us?